Hello and welcome to this broadcast by Brexit Watch. I'm your host, Jonathan Saxty. Today we are delighted to welcome back to Brexit Watch the former Conservative Party leader, Sir Iain Duncan Smith. Sir Iain, welcome back to Brexit Watch.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Sir Iain, the internal market bill is on everyone's mind at the moment. Why, in your opinion, is the internal market bill so necessary? Why can't we just leave things as they are?
Well, very simply put, the original agreement, which had a protocol attached concerning Northern Ireland, which meant that therefore they were able to operate without a hard border on the border of Northern Ireland, but there were certain relatively limited checks on products, things like phytosanitary products and others that would be crossing into Northern Ireland, but it would be a pretty light touch process. That all was put into abeyance after we had signed it. Everybody ratified it. We did so by act of Parliament. They did so by a vote in Parliament. But having ratified it, it was always clear that in the protocol that the joint committee would meet, because there were a lot of very vague specifications and rules in there which needed to be resolved so they couldn't be abused by anybody. I was one of those that argued early on back last year that even with the protocol, this withdrawal agreement was a problem for us because it opened the door to too much interference by the European Union and European law. Not all of it in the protocol, also numbers of things in the withdrawal agreement main body. But in the protocol, it made it even worse because if you look carefully at the way European law operates, it meant that there was a kind of back door by which the European Union could impose European regulations on the UK, notwithstanding the fact that we were a sovereign nation and no longer part of the EU. I'll give you an example to that. One of those is that it is wholly within their scope, as things stand at the moment, to insist that the state aid rules that apply to the European Union would also apply not just to Northern Irish businesses who might be exporting to the European Union, but also to businesses in Great Britain on the mainland. And the way that is worked is that, of course, the way they interpret it is if there is any chance whatsoever that a business is putting trade through to Europe, then even if it's not, even if it doesn't even sell to Northern Ireland or doesn't send any goods there, they reserve the right to be able to say that they must comply with their state aid rules, even if it never crosses any border into the European Union, because it might, and it might do that through Ireland without a further check. So what they've done is impose their will, and this is what they intend to do. So things like that, also the possibility that they wouldn't give us third country status, which allows us to export foodstuffs, particularly to the European Union because our standards are considered equivalent. Now, this after 40 years of being a member of the EU, where all of our standards right now are exactly the same as theirs, is an absurdity. But they've clung on to this idea that they could, if necessary, declare us not third country, which would mean basically that anything that we were selling to Northern Ireland would have to go through a customs process between us and Northern Ireland. And if there were no deal and there were tariffs, we'd have to be paying tariffs to get our goods into Northern Ireland. This is unacceptable. It's unconscionable, to use a Geoffrey Cox word. And therefore, I think we had to act. So there's just some examples of it. The EU has refused to engage in all this period. There is a joint committee that's meant to resolve these issues, and the European Union has point blank refused to discuss these issues in the joint committee. So you can see straight away they think they've got us because of these elements in the protocol, and the Prime Minister was left with no other route but to say to them, well, you're not going to have them because we're going to outlaw them in the UK. And Northern Ireland is still part of the UK. So that's where the spat comes from.
Iain, you mentioned your colleague, Geoffrey Cox. What do you say to those Tory rebels right now, particularly those who are saying that it would be unconscionable for Britain to break an international treaty like this?
Well, I do say that they kind of hoisted international law onto some kind of pedestal that it's never been on. There are plenty of times when the European Union simply refuses to implement international law that it has signed up to through international treaties. WTO is in constant dispute with the EU because it refuses to apply what members of the WTO are meant to, which is direct effect of judgments made at the WTO. So they've been fined already for state aids and support to Airbus. They've never paid that, refused to accept it. They refused to accept a number of other judgments. There's plenty of others to do with steel and all sorts of things. But also, there is an Advocate General ruling which puts this all into context. The EU believes categorically that their, should we call it, domestic law, which makes up their constitution, and they call it a constitution of the people, not governments, that has priority over any treaty law. So in other words, if they've signed up to a treaty, they must see the obligations in the treaty, as they call it, through the domestic process, which may lead them to say it affects our constitutional settlement. We can't just give it direct effect. We won't use it. Now, they're moaning at us, but they already do this. This is what they've done. You know, they're a very good case. And that explains it all, and it's very clear. So all this, you know, worry and concern, no one's ever moaned in the UK about the EU's refusal to adopt rulings from arrangements that they have made, which we would call treaty obligations. And so here they are now moaning at us, and all our politicians going, oh my God, this is terrible, we must never break a law. We've already breached international law at key moments where it conflicts with our own domestic rules. For example, we didn't give the right to vote to prisoners. You know, we were meant to. It's meant to have direct effect when the Court of Human Rights makes a judgment on that. We didn't do it. We're still in breach right now. And so my answer to that is, you know, all countries have to assess the application of international law against the effect on its constitutional settlement. And we therefore included clause 38, which Bill Cash drafted, which said it's a notwithstanding clause, which said notwithstanding anything that we've agreed to in this international agreement, withdrawal agreement, we reserve the right to say no and to legislate accordingly if it affects our sovereign purpose and our legal structure and constitution.
Do you think the Prime Minister will face challenges getting this bill into law, considering the fact that the rebels may grow, and of course it's got to go through the Lords as well?
Who can say? I don't think the government will get close to even losing this. They will get their way. There may be some rebels on it. But the honest truth, most of my colleagues just want to get Brexit done. And if the government needs us to back them whilst they go and tell the European Union you have a choice to make, because now we're going to block off all these avenues where you say you are going to affect us, then now you have to come to the table and be serious and negotiate these points. I think we need to give them the room to do that.
If the withdrawal agreement really is as pernicious as many say, why not just ditch the whole thing? Why not just get rid of the withdrawal agreement entirely?
Don't tempt me. I would get rid of it tomorrow. But the reality is I voted for it in the end because of clause 38, which gave us this absolute exemption via our constitution. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you may have to resile from it. Under the law of treaties, you're quite capable of saying, do you know what, we no longer sign up to this, we're stepping away. So if the EU kicks off too much and we have further rows and they don't accept all of this, that may become the place that we are at. And what we mustn't be is a subservient state on the fringes of Europe that takes European law over which we have no control and no say. And that no self-respecting nation would accept that at all.
What do you say to those who suggest there is a threat to the Good Friday Agreement?
Well, there is a threat to the Good Friday Agreement, but it's not coming from the quarter where some would say if we legislate like this, we will threaten it. Actually, if we don't legislate, we're threatened. Imagine what happens if the EU imposes this ruling that they don't have third country status for the UK, which means all our goods would have to go through checks and tariffs to cross the border into Northern Ireland. That would breach the Act of Union. But more importantly, the settlement on the Good Friday/Belfast Agreement is very clear. All relevant parties to that treaty, that agreement rather, have to be consulted and have to state their opinions and views on what is affecting the operation of that agreement. And of course, the thing that would affect it would be the constitutional settlement, because if we were busy putting up barriers between Northern Ireland and the UK, we would be breaching the Treaty of Union between then Ireland and the UK, which now Northern Ireland has. And that would be unacceptable. So, you know, the reality is nothing would damage that relationship more than railroading an idea that somehow we must do what the European Union tells us. If we do that, we won't have Northern Ireland very long.
Iain, why has it taken until now for anything to be done until the 11th hour? I mean, did the Prime Minister not have a golden opportunity between the landslide victory in December and the passage of when the Withdrawal Agreement became law to actually do something about this? Why has it taken until now?
Well, a number of us warned them about the application of the protocol and some of the rules and regulations within the Withdrawal Agreement proper. We were very quick to notify them before they signed on the problem of state aids, and that they would use it as a backdoor to get control of our companies. This turned out to be absolutely correct. So why? Well, I suppose you could say COVID got in the way, which it did. You can understand that. But also, you know, the UK government was coming from a point where they thought that the European Union would act in good faith and they would reach an amicable settlement that negated any tariffs or blockages or anything else. The EU has not behaved like that. And they should have known they wouldn't, because every country that's negotiated with them comes away loathing the EU because they're bullies. So what they're trying to do is bully us into accepting everything from the EU. And my answer is not at all. Not at all.
What do you see as the EU response to all of this?
Well, it's risible, really, to come and lecture us on what they call breaking the law when they do all of that endlessly at the EU. As I pointed out earlier on in this conversation, the EU has a terrible habit of just dismissing elements that it wants. And, you know, this is enshrined, as I said, in the Caddy case, where the Advocate General's opinion states very clearly that the EU constitution, as it is framed, which is the laws basically, is in many ways superior to any of the international agreements. Now that is a very major statement, and you can argue in clause 38, where we are saying, notwithstanding, nothing in this shall weaken our ability for Parliament to be sovereign. And that's very much a statement along the lines the EU's already made.
Sir Iain, is it possible this is some kind of ploy or negotiating tactic? If a trade deal with the EU is agreed in the next few weeks, partly because of the sabre rattling over the Withdrawal Agreement, obviously the internal market bill would be null and void. It wouldn't be needed. There are those who would say this is a bit of a negotiating tactic on behalf of the Prime Minister, especially considering the fact that to mask some of the most pernicious effects of the Northern Ireland Protocol, a trade deal would have to be between the UK and the EU would have to be very close indeed. What do you say to that kind of claim?
Well, it is always possible that the government may yet decide that they need the trade deal more than anything else. Don't get me wrong, I would be happy to have a trade deal. In truth, though, our biggest part of our trade is through services. They're our biggest exporters. They are intriguingly in a global surplus in the world, whereas opposed to our goods and agri-products are in a global, well, they are at fact smaller. So if you look at the deficit we've got on trade with the EU on things like goods and agri-products, we're running up a deficit of around about 100 billion last time I looked. And it is in fact the surplus on financial services that gives us about a £20 billion bite into that, which means that we are running at around about 80 billion deficit net. So that means essentially that it is probably more in the EU's interest than it is in ours to do a straight trade deal. We benefit less from the trade deal, which is about tariffs, where we would benefit a lot more if the EU showed willing and negotiated services, financial services. And there you're not dealing with tariffs, you're dealing with regulations. And so we would seriously want them to do that, but they've refused point blank, which I think in itself is bad faith. It could easily be that the government decides to take the negotiation line, and part of the negotiation is they suspend the deal. I won't be a happy man if they do that, because I think it's necessary for us to have the ability to be able, where necessary, to just essentially say you've not behaved well, and therefore we're not going to adopt certain principles, and we should have the freedom to do that. But that's down to the government. Yes, of course, they'll be negotiating, and they'll no doubt be negotiating hard, but they have constantly said to us they are literally looking for ways to get themselves through this process with a negotiation, but with the full knowledge that should the negotiation not work, that the UK government is set to leave without a deal. Now, I hope that they are going for the latter, not the former, but we will see, But I know a lot of colleagues in the House want to get a deal, but most importantly, they want to maintain our sovereign position in control of our laws and our money, and make sure that we make the final decisions on all of that.
So Iain, just to clarify, you wouldn't rule out the possibility this could be a negotiating tactic?
Yeah, well, no, it could. I mean, it's totally possible for them not to go all the way with this. To do so, they would have been deceitful to a number of us, because we were led to believe they were going the whole way and this was going on the statute book. I think it needs to, otherwise no one will pay any attention to them. They need this on the statute book, then that's proof positive that they've understood what they've got to do. And it means others who look on know that they mean business.
Iain Duncan Smith, thank you for your time today.
Pleasure.